Hello and welcome to Baseball Barbacast, the only baseball podcast in the world with more energy on trade deadline day than AJ Preller. I'm Jake Mintz. That's Jordan Shusterman. And I only have one phone.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can promise that. I mean, I'm pretty fired up for this live edition of Baseball Barbacast. You for joining us on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you're watching. I see you in the YouTube chat. We really appreciate it. We'll get to some of your questions and comments later. This is indeed live. The deadline is officially under half an hour away. But as you opened this show up, Jake, and saying that we have more energy than AJ Preller, I mean, there's still plenty of time left for him to make 25 more trades. And I don't know if I have the energy to talk about if he has 25 more trades in them.
That is a very legitimate point on this delightful live edition of our show. It's pretty straightforward. The trade deadline is happening right now. If you're listening to this after the fact, you know where everyone is going or where they have gone. Just be shocked along with us. We will be going all the way through the deadline as trades happen. We will react to them here. We're going to go through the trades that have already happened today and have a dang good time.
Yeah, and if anything happens in the last half an hour, obviously you are going to see our live reactions. I understand there are a lot of people tuning in wondering, does Jake know? Does he know about all the deals? And the answer is yes. Maybe someday in the future we will bring that bit back where Jake goes dark and he doesn't know about any of the trades. But no, he is aware at least of the ones that have happened up until 5:30. But if one happens at the buzzer here, we're going to find out together, and you're all going to get to see that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Now, I will say, Jake, before we get to our first topic also, I mean, this first topic is not one that we expected. Oh, yeah? Do we already have something?
Yeah, we have a trade right here. Active trade.
Tell me.
The Chicago Cubs
are
acquiring I haven't seen it. Super utility man Willie Castro from the Minnesota Twins. First on the news, John Heyman, Willie, Willi Castro, one of the more underrated players available at the deadline, in my opinion. Could become this year's version of Tommy Edman. Switch hitter, can play a lot of different positions on an expiring contract. Better offensively than you think he is. The Cubs, who it felt like were sleeping their way through this deadline, finally do something that makes me intrigued.
I am intrigued. I like Willie Castro. I think he is good. However, that is not the trade that the Minnesota Twins have made that people want us to talk about. So, Jake Mintz, let us get to our opener.
Carlos Correa goes home. The Minnesota Twins have sent Carlos Correa to the Houston Astros in exchange for TBD. We don't know the return yet. However, we do know that Correa is back on the Astros. What in the world? This came out of absolutely nowhere, it seemed like. When you looked at all of the rankings on various websites of like best players to get moved at the deadline, no Correa, like not on the radar. Now, it's worth saying the overall impact of this deal versus just the total shock value of this deal, there's a bit of a difference. Like this is sexier and more flooring than it is going to move the needle of the rest of the season, in my personal opinion. But Jordan, take me through your reaction of seeing this.
I mean, I know, I think I sort of agree with the sentiment that you're getting at, because there are some other very impactful players that have been traded and maybe still will be traded in the next 20 minutes. But I think this is part of what makes the Carlos Correa story so interesting. There's so many basic levels of it, which is just like, oh my God, he's back on the Astros. I mean, that is a shocking thing. This was not someone that we ever expected to really be traded again for any reason, let alone back to Houston, when you consider what it has taken this season to require the Astros to need Carlos Correa for any reason, right? Isaac Paredes is having this serious injury that is obviously much worse than I think we thought at the time. It seems like he's going to be out for the season. He was having a good season since he came over from the Cubs in that Kyle Tucker deal. Jeremy Pena also having a marvelous season, and he's still coming back from injury. It sounds like Carlos Correa is going to play third base. But I want to get back to the premise that you kind of laid out there of how much is this going to change the season. And the reason that I totally understand you are saying that is because you pull up Carlos Correa this year and you see that he has a 704 OPS. You see that he's slugging 386. You see that he's a well below average hitter. And you say, okay, well, how big of a difference is this guy going to make? And yet, this is what is so bizarre about Correa at this stage in his career is he is essentially in his 4 years in Minnesota alternated looking like an MVP candidate and looking like a completely overpaid, not superstar whatsoever. And injuries have been a part of that, but he has played a lot of games this year. I don't know. I mean, maybe he just turns it back on. I mean, he's mostly been on the field this year. We know he's a marvelous postseason performer, and we know the Astros are clearly pushing to win another division title. We're going to talk about the Mariners a little bit later. They're pushing to kind of challenge them there, but I have no idea what to expect from Correa whatsoever. And now he's playing a position that I'm sure he can handle, but he has never played in his career, which will be third base.
And all of the underlying metrics back up the fact that he has been mediocre. This is not a case of a player being unlucky. He looks like something of a different player this year. Go back a year ago, though, and you're right. I mean, he was freaking awesome. Now, he was not healthy the entire season. He was 51% better than league average OPS plus in a half a season. Like, he was an awesome hitter. That has not been the case this year. It is this trade is shocking for like 85 different reasons and hilarious for 85 different reasons. But like, something that comes to my mind is if I had told you a month ago that they would be trading for Correa, you would have said to play where? Because they went out and got Isaac Paredes to play third. He was an all-star. Jeremy Pena took a huge step forward to become a borderline superstar at shortstop. So it's like, is he going to play second base? With those two guys getting hurt and now being out for maybe longer than we expected, Pena due back soon, there is a spot here for Carlos Correa. Now, obviously, the other thing this calls back is the Astros reacquiring Justin Verlander at the deadline a couple years ago. He departs in free agency, joins the Mets. Jim Crane, their owner of the Astros, feels like he's got his finger on the pulse here. He's like, hey, remember that guy? Yeah, he was great. And he goes and gets it.
And it seems like in this case, the relationship between Correa and Crane is even stronger than it ever was between Verlander and Crane, right? But this is the thing, and we're certainly going to talk about the Padres here in a little bit and how what the Padres have done today, only one general manager would ever do, and that's AJ Preller. This kind of move is something that really only one owner would try and do, and that is Jim Crane. And so the stars had to align. So much weird stuff had to happen with Houston, and obviously so much weird stuff had to happen with Minnesota, who has had this incredibly disappointing run over the last two seasons. Now, this is the other part about this. We're talking about it because we don't know the return. We're not talking about this as some sort of superstar being traded for a haul of prospects. This is basically a salary dump, right? I mean, he is owed $90 million over the next 3 seasons after this one. When they signed that contract, Minnesota signed that contract with Correa, it was certainly out of character and in some ways encouraging, inspiring, wow, look at the Twins giving Carlos Correa all this money. It had some ups, it had some downs. But when you consider where they are as a franchise, where they are in their contention window, when you consider all the other pieces that they're selling off, you consider that they are a franchise literally for sale. It doesn't stun me that if the shocking opportunity arose to dump $90 million in future commitments, that they were like, yeah, I think we're going to do this.
I mean, turn the clock back for the Twins here to the 2023 postseason, and they win their first playoff series and first playoff game, right, in like a decade and change. They knock off the Blue Jays at home. Target Field's going crazy. I don't even think, Correa goes 2 for 3 in the clincher.
And then who do they play next round?
And who do they play next round? The Houston Astros, who knocked them out. And since then, it has just been a total descent into baseball sadness. And if you're a Twins fan, this is going to be a tough run. It does feel like they're just selling everything they possibly can to kind of get out from under all the money. I think over the last 48 hours, they've shed about $40 million worth of salary for this season, not to mention the money moving forward on Correa. Really remarkable stuff.
Yeah, and even recognizing that Correa has kind of been this volatile asset and volatile performer, you're looking at this roster now, and especially as they move off of Jhoan Duran, who we'll talk about later. And as far as I know, Joe Ryan has not been traded as we are talking right now. We'll see if they move any more relievers, Griffin Jacks. but this is just not a roster that looks remotely competitive anytime soon. And again, as I mentioned again, that they are about to be sold, perhaps they are really entering a rather dramatic transitional period, which for this franchise is pretty bleak.
So this news originally broken by Brian McTaggart of MLB.com, I believe, who said that he said that Carlos Correa has been reacquired, which is technically correct, but is hilarious phrasing because the acquiring that took place on the Astros behalf was drafting him when he was 17 years old, first overall, all the way back in 2012 when we were in high school.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and this is the other part about the Correa story as we bring it back to Houston and then ultimately Minnesota. We're not going to go beat by beat of what happened that led up to him signing with the Twins and then signing back with the Twins, but it has been a wild ride of transactions for this guy. And not to mention all the stuff involved with Houston and the cheating scandal. Like there's so much involved in this guy's career, but this is another twist where it's just stunning. It's just stunning. And by the way, no matter how much money he's making, no matter how much exactly how good he's been this year, and the fact that he's slugging 386, like the Astros are probably going to be back in the postseason, and he's going to be with them one way or another. And I don't know what they do with Isaac Paredes next season. Like thinking about next year, who knows? But the point is the fact that we're going to be watching Carlos Correa in the postseason with the Astros again in 2025 is astonishing. And the Astros obviously have done some other stuff. It sounds like they still have some other stuff in the works, bringing in Jesus Sanchez. I like that move. Again, they are clearly trying to patch some holes that they have with all of these injuries. Maybe they still have a last move left in them before this deadline. But the Astros, they act in a very singular fashion. And I think this move is one hell of a reminder.
Man. And here's the other thing. Correa's still only 30. He's been in our lives for such a long time as a baseball character. He is 1 month older than Brent Rooker, who in some ways feels like he just showed up recently, like 5 minutes ago, right? Like Carlos Correa he still has time left. Now that means he has to stay on the field and be healthy, which he hasn't always done. But there is more time here, I think, than maybe you would expect given how long he's been in our lives and the amount of time he spent on the field. Jordan, I think that's all we have to say about Carlos Correa for now until we get the specific return.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it sounds like Chandler Rome reporting there's maybe one player going back that will end up being somewhat. I don't know how you settle on a deal like that, because when it's such a money motivated move, the trade value becomes a little bit strange. But again, just thinking about Crane and thinking about being unwilling to go the extra distance to keep Alex Bregman in Houston to be the third baseman, right? That was a clear line in the sand that he drew. And then after all this weird first half that they've had with all these injuries, but to still be in first place, to decide to make this decision is it's a one of a kind decision. Maybe it's reckless, maybe it's bad, maybe it's good, but it is certainly giving us something to talk about on this live baseball podcast, which I appreciate.
Jordan, you mentioned Alex Bregman opting out of his contract probably at the end of the year. He'll be a free agent again. Who's to say he doesn't come home to all roads lead back to Minute Maid Park? I guess it's not Minute Maid Park. This will be Carlos Correa's first game at Daikin Park, I guess, as a member of the Houston Astros. History being made. True. Speaking of history being made, AJ Preller, my guy, the San Diego Padres, cooking with gas. And that is something we absolutely need to talk about.
Now, Jake, what is so great about this is that when we went to bed last night, the Padres were one of the only teams that had not made a trade yet at this deadline. And we knew there was some reporting. It was like, don't worry. We got Rosenthal throwing stuff out there. Like, don't worry. AJ Preller's getting ready to go. This was the same thing last year where I believe the big Tanner Scott trade did not happen until like an hour or two before the deadline. But this is a whole other beast as we wake up this morning and we learn that AJ Preller is going for it once again. It's so funny when we all say, "Oh, Padres are going for it." It's like, yeah, no, that is the basic level. You can't keep pushing forward when you are just already all the way down
Yeah.
on the gas. And in this case, we have trading one of the best prospects that we have seen traded at the deadline in years in shortstop Leo DeVries for the hardest thrower on the planet, Mason Miller, who is one of the more remarkable breakouts that we've had in baseball in the last handful of years from the Athletics. Also left-handed pitcher JP Sears going to San Diego. They give up DeVries. They give up three of their top pitching prospects, also Braden Nett, Henry Baez, and Eduarniel Nunez, who also throws 100, but it's not nearly as famous as Mason Miller. Mason Miller, Jake Mintz, would you like to start with Mason Miller? Would you like to start with AJ Preller? Would you like to start with the Padres, who have stayed busy throughout this day and have continued to add all the way up until this deadline? How do we start to process this?
So I don't really watch or understand NASCAR, and something that confuses me about NASCAR and maybe F1 too a little bit is if you're going fast, how do you go faster than fast, right? Like if I'm driving the car and I'm trying to pass you and you're going as fast as you can, I'm going as fast as I can. Like that's AJ Preller. Okay. AJ Preller is going faster when he's already going fast. And I am so grateful as someone who gets paid to do this and as someone who enjoys this world that AJ Preller is in it, that AJ Preller is a different character than every other GM. Is he a good GM? Is AJ Preller a good GM? I think so. Maybe. I don't particularly care because he is an entertaining GM. That is what matters to me. Now, this deal is a little bit different than some of the others he's made for a couple reasons. Mason Miller has a ton of control left. He is not a free agent until after the 2029 season. And that's relevant because when we say AJ Preller and the Padres are going for it, that is true. But this is not a move to push all the chips in just for 2025. Miller will be around for a number of years. He is a reliever. Relievers are notably volatile and unpredictable. I will say, when you throw 103, it's probably more dependable year to year than your average Joe.
So I've already seen the suggestions from both fans and even people in San Diego that with that team control and thinking long-term, that perhaps they could contemplate moving him back into a starting role, which of course we've seen them do with some other pitchers. And he was starting, even in college and even up through the minors to a degree. Ultimately, the A's decided this is a special arm that can be immediately impactful in relief instead of trying to kind of hone the strike throwing and the secondaries in a starting role. And so that's how we ended up with this almost historic level of velocity as a closer. The Padres and Mason Miller can try and make that decision next year. What matters is right now. The Padres are, of course, trying to win their first ever World Series. And as we speak right now, they have decided not to trade Robert Suarez. Maybe that changes in the last 15 minutes, but that's relevant because this is why this is also wild. The Padres have the best bullpen in the league. They have the lowest bullpen ERA. This did not look like they needed Mason Miller. And so even if they are thinking long-term and they're thinking, well, maybe Robert Suarez leaves in free agency, maybe we turn Mason Miller into starter to patch some of the holes in the rotation, that's all fine. Right now, for them to spend this prospect package, which we are certainly going to get to, for a position that did not appear to be of need is astonishing.
We have 4 news nuggets to hit quickly before we hop back in to Mason Miller land. Number 1, the Kansas City Royals are acquiring Bailey Falter of the Pittsburgh Pirates. The man with extensions so long, it feels like the Space Jam dunk. Shouts out to Standy Koufax behind me on the shelf. That's number 1. Number 2, the Boston Red Sox are acquiring right-handed pitcher Dustin May for the Los Angeles Dodgers. The hair and beard will match the alternate uniforms as the reddest head heads east. Kind of a weird one. Dustin May, his name had been in some trade rumors recently. There was a like a tweet from Dave Vassay about how he like took a picture on the field with his family at Dodger Stadium at the end of his last home game, which is interesting. Does this move the needle for the Red Sox? For me, no. We will get to the Red Sox a little bit later for a team that traded away Rafael Devers and then said it's going to open some things up for us at the deadline. So hold on to your underwear. This does not count as underwear hold worthy. Other ones coming down the pipe. The Padres, this is via Ken Rosenthal. The Padres are acquiring left-handed pitcher Nestor Cortez Jr. from the Milwaukee Brewers, bringing an end to what was just a legendary tenure in Wisconsin for Nestor Cortez. He was traded from the Yankees to the Brewers, over the winter for Caleb Durbin, or with Caleb Durbin. Will retire, making 2 starts for the team. One historically catastrophic, one actually pretty good. Then he went on the IL. He's set to come back soon. He will not be making any more starts for the Brewers. Remember, Nestor Cortez was so bad in that start that we all had to talk about torpedo bats for like a month. Okay, so the end of that's what I will remember from Nestor Cortez in Milwaukee. Never forgive him. 2 more for you, Jordan. One, the Cincinnati Reds acquire Miguel Andujar, finally traded at the deadline, but it's not from the Yankees for a player they need. He'll be on the Reds. He's fine. He's a league average hitter. The Reds could use league average hitters. This is fine. Last nugget, and this is from Craig Mish. The Miami Marlins will not, I repeat, not be trading Sandy Alcantara today. He will be the ace down the stretch as the Marlins keep pushing this season and developing for the future. The Fish are going for it, baby. The Marlins are just 9 games back of the Mets. Okay? Just 9 games back of the Mets of the division. Just 7 back. No, this is just so that they can either trade him this winter or trade him next season. The Marlins have been a lot better than people expected. We have one more coming down. This is what the trade deadline's all about, my friends. Jack Curry reporting, how about this? The Yankees have acquired Jose Caballero from the Rays in exchange for Everson Pereira and a player to be named later. He will be pulled from the Yankees-Rays game currently going on. The Yankees and Rays were delayed, so he's going to get to do the Anthony Santander walk. Hugs in the Rays dugout. He should totally walk across the field, right? Don't walk behind in the tunnel. Just
time. Let's make a show of it. That is okay. That's a lot of like very periphery moves. I think Dustin May is a really interesting one. The Red Sox, who are still trying to figure out what in the world they can get from Walker Buehler, are like, ooh, maybe that famous Dodgers pitcher with a high ERA will thrive in Boston, which we'll see how that goes. And also just like the Dodgers having kind of a strange deadline in general, I think is one of my bigger takeaways, but we can say that for sure once we actually get past 6 o'clock.
We have 7 minutes left, and if the Dodgers stay where they are right now, it is an all-time shrug emoji from the defending champs, because the San Diego Padres are kind of on their heels. They are just 3 games up in the National League West over the Padres, and now we'll hop back over to Mason Miller. So I like this move for San Diego. I like it more for Sacktown, Yolo County, the Athletics. I'll get to that in a second. The reason I like it for San Diego is because it adds to a strength that you saw them do this last year, was acquire these shutdown relievers that allowed them to shorten playoff games, right? One strategy is find dominant starter. Another strategy is get 4 really good relievers, and it essentially does the same thing. So if you can get 4 quality innings out of Randy Vasquez or Nick Pivetta in a playoff game, you can then just turn it over to Estrada, Morejon, Adams, Suarez, Miller. Like, whew, that's freaking good, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. And clearly that was kind of the strategy last year as well. And it worked until it didn't. Eventually the offense went quiet. Now we know that the Padres have also made other moves, which we should get to here in a second. But we also have to talk about this return because, as we mentioned, one of the most highly touted prospects in years to be traded at the deadline in Leo DeVries. This felt like one of the players, because what Preller has been so incredible about over the years is essentially trading everybody except for those couple that he just refuses. You know, Jackson Merrill fell in that bucket. We thought maybe James Wood would fall in that bucket. He goes for Soto. That was, of course, one where he really cashed him in. But DeVries felt like at this deadline, it was like, who would even be worth trading Leo DeVries for? You know, Stephen Kwan was clearly being talked about as a concept and someone that maybe you could do. Now that's someone that not as much control as Mason Miller, obviously completely different skill set, but also, you know, a multiple time All-Star outfielder at clearly a position of need, like one of maybe the biggest position of need for San Diego. Maybe you could argue that would make a little bit more sense. To do it for Miller shows how highly they think of Miller, shows what they think Miller could be for them in the future and right now. But DeVries is special, right? I mean, this is a guy who got one of the largest bonuses signing out of the Dominican Republic a couple years ago. And, you know, maybe you pull up his baseball reference page and be like, what's the big deal? It's not like he's hitting 350 and, you know, slugging 600. When you are this advanced, when you are a switch hitting shortstop who is succeeding, who is an above average hitter in high A, that is not a small thing. This dude is younger than JoJo Parker, who was just drafted in the first round out of high school by the Toronto Blue Jays in the top 10, younger than like a good number of the top high school players in this year's draft. Leo DeVries is younger than, and he is already in high A. He is already succeeding. He seems to be getting better by the week. That is the kind of player that has just spectacular trade value and clearly was the kind that was going to be required for the A's to move off Mason Miller, who I don't blame you for thinking there's no reason they're going to trade Mason Miller when he has all these years left of control for him.
Players like this don't get traded often. I think 15, 20 years ago, they got traded a lot more often. And then when the technological revolution took over our game and the models started telling us that trading away that amount of control is usually not valuable, not valued, we saw kind of a shift away from that strategy. Doing comps, comparing players to players is sometimes irresponsible. Okay. I'm going to be a little irresponsible. Do you know who else had a OPS around 700, 750 in high A as an 18-year-old who was a shortstop and was a switch hitter?
Tell me.
Francisco Lindor. And if it all goes right, that's what this looks like, right? That is the type of player Leo DeVries could turn into. And when you and I saw Lindor when he was in high A, double A, right? And it wasn't like the power wasn't obvious or even there yet. He didn't wow you with tools in the way that, like, I remember when we saw like Bubba Starling. I know that's a bad example. Or like if you saw Buxton as a minor leaguer, but it's just the polish on DeVries is really significant. And for the A's to go out and get a player like this who could be a cornerstone, these types of players with this level of potential are very, very hard to get. So good for the A's I love this trade for the A's, man.
Yeah, and I would also just say that DeVries is the prize. That's the point. This is a franchise, an organization, a roster that needs pitching really badly, and those three pitchers are good and are probably going to be in the big leagues with the A's in the next year or so. And that's also an incredible thing to kind of add to your depth there, because obviously you're trading away Mason Miller. That's more quality innings that you do not have. And the A's are building one heck of a assortment of young bats. And now DeVries joins that maybe at the end of next year after that. They have a long way to go on the mound. But I think that those guys, Net and Nunez and Baez could help very, very soon. So I agree. But hey, Preller,
I just think
bless.
if you have the opportunity to trade a reliever, any reliever, for even one with control, for a top 5, top 10 prospect in baseball who could develop into a perennial all-star shortstop, I think that's a risk worth taking if you are not a competitive team, right? And I think that's what's important here. Could the A's be good next year? Maybe. Everyone thought they were going to be cute this year, and they kind of still suck because they can't get any outs. And so I think this is totally worth doing. We are now 1 minute away from the deadline. And a number of teams have yet to do really anything of note. I'm looking at you, LA. I'm looking at you, Cubs. Looking at you, Red Sox. Dustin May is not going to placate the masses.
No,
As the clock
no,
clicks
it's not.
down here, Jordan.
We're going to see, there are some buzzer beaters that are going to trickle in that even as far as, 610, 615, we'll start to hear more of. So we'll get to those as we can finally close the door on this deadline and say, hey, Dodgers, hey, Rangers, hey, Red Sox, whatever, Cubs, Tigers, you didn't do enough. We'll have the opportunity to do that here in a little bit. Last thing on the Padres, because we also still have to give them credit for continuing to add big leaguers. And I know you have another trade here for me in a second, but let's close the book on San Diego because there was a stretch here where it was like, this is a weird sequence. You're going to go all in on getting a reliever that you don't actually need and not, address these position players that you clearly need more, whether it's depth, whether it's catcher, whether it's the outfield. They get Ryan O'Hearn, Ramon Laureano from Baltimore. Freddie Fermin from Kansas City is a little bit more perplexing because he's 30 years old and a below average hitter, and you trade away two young pitchers that definitely could have helped you soon. That's weird. At the same time, this is now looking like a more complete lineup that can challenge the Dodgers, that can push farther in October, because the bottom of this offense right now has been so bad that getting both of these guys is hugely impressive for all the price. Of course, they sold the farm. The farm is in a bad place. That's fine. We know the plan, and you have to give them credit for adding these guys.
And from an attitude perspective, having been around the Orioles a little bit this year, O'Hearn and Laureano are middle fingers. They are F you guys. They have edge. Like, they play angry. They're going to be fan favorites in San Diego. They're going to contribute to that team. They're good in the room. Like, I love that they went together. I like the package the Orioles got back. We'll maybe get to that a little bit later in the show as those details trickle in. Laureano is I know heading into the deadline, O'Hearn was getting a lot of the buzz here because he put up such a hot April and he made the All-Star team. Laureano has been pretty similar as a hitter for a while now. I would even say, has been better. Now, he's missed some time, not playing. He wasn't playing every to start the year, but he also has another year of control left. Like, he's got a $6 million option that the Padres are probably going to pick up. Like, he is a good player.
Yeah, no, you absolutely have to give them credit for going someone that's beyond Red O'Hearn, a free agent, but Laureano can help them next year. It sounds like we have a pretty big one here at the buzzer. Is that correct?
4 more trades coming in at the buzzer. This one gets an all caps breaking from Mr. Jeff Passan. The Tampa Bay Rays are acquiring right-handed reliever Griffin Jax from the Minnesota Twins.
What? Wait, the Rays?
The Rays.
What are the Rays doing? I am super perplexed by the sequence. They gave the Dodgers a bunch for Hunter Fiducia. As you just said, they traded Jose Caballero away. They traded Zach Littell to the Reds. Griffin Jax, who I believe leads all relievers in Fangraphs WAR over the last 3 seasons, ahead of some guy named Emmanuel Clase. Anything going on with him?
No.
I am really, really confused by this one. But I mean, again, multiple years of control. If the Rays think that they can be good next year, which they probably do, Griffin Jax is good and helps. But what a weird one.
This is what this is. This is the Rays looking over at Minneapolis and they're going, "Whoa, that's being torn up. I'm going to give them a call. See what we can get in. See if we can get our hands in there." That's what this is. This is the Rays realizing that the Twins are going full sell and acquiring a player who could maybe help them this year if they crawl back into it a little bit more. I mean, they're not that far out of it, right? I believe the Rays are currently they're like 3 out. But moving forward, Griffin Jax will be on that team. Another deal here at the buzzer is Charles Morton, ground chuck, the 41-year-old eternal legend to the Detroit Tigers.
Okay. So the Tigers felt like they did end up adding a lot of players. It did kind of seem like a bit of a half measure situation. does not surprise me. I think that we have not seen the Tigers in this front office act as like it's go time. They have not yet gone to the school of AJ Preller. Not that anybody maybe should, but that's not really in their bag at this point. So it would have been almost out of character to see them push. But at the same time, you have the easiest path to a division title and perhaps the 1 seed in the entire league. You should be taking advantage of this opportunity and trying to become the best team in the American League and make aggressive maneuvers the way that we saw Toronto, the Yankees, Seattle, Houston, and Detroit kind of just did a mishmash of like, this will help.
Now, they could afford to be passive from a fan sentiment timeline perspective. Let's say the Tigers win the division, which they're going to, and they lose 3-1 in the first round. Are people in Detroit going to be furious at the Tigers? Probably not. You know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, here's another trade. You haven't seen this one?
No, I didn't see this one. By the way, I agree with the general sentiment about the Tigers. To me, it's still like, the opportunity is there. Let's not just keep kicking the can down the road. We don't know.
I agree with you.
Now, I will say the AL Central Royals, give you credit, they're trying. But with the direction that Cleveland and Minnesota is going, maybe the AL Central is going to be there for Detroit for a while. I still would prefer them to be a little bit more aggressive. Okay, let's talk about the New York Yankees, Jake Mintz, because they have been adding. This is another thing. When we woke up today, they had only acquired hitters. They had acquired Ryan McMahon. They had acquired Ahmed Rosario. They had acquired Austin Slater. And it was like, okay, well, you can see where those guys fit on the roster, but the need here appears to be on the mound, particularly in the bullpen, where their bullpen ERA is one of the worst in baseball over the last month. We just saw Devin Williams choke it up again, and him and Weaver have kind of alternated going through struggles. At their best, those guys are really good, but they have injuries, and clearly they needed bullpen help. They get David Bednar, and now they get Camilo Doval from the Giants. How about that? So, and Jake Burt from the Rockies. Wow, they made multiple trades with the Rockies. That is a hell of an accomplishment there. And it didn't involve Joe Harvey. Congratulations. This is okay. Okay, now by the way, Mets and Phillies fans are listening. It's like, guys, come on. What about us? We just remade our whole bullpen. We got Durant. Like, we're gonna get to you later. But the Yankees fully, given the bullpen makeover is, I think, appropriate. I think that this is something that they needed to do, and I'm really impressed.
Super fascinating strategic decision here. And I think a very intelligent reading of the market, this particular deadline, where perhaps, okay, so what do the Yankees really need, right? They probably needed one bullpen arm and then like a starter that they trusted in a playoff game, is how I would have like gone about the Yankee deadline. But instead of trying to get a starter they trust in a playoff game, because there were very few types of those starters available that got moved, right? You now have, instead, they're basically going to just shorten the game with this 5-headed, 6-headed monster. If you're like me and you love Tim Hill, and if Johnny Lasagna like gets back on track, right? You have Bednar, Williams, Weaver, Hill, Bird, Doval, Loizaga. Like, that's sick, dude. That is awesome. And pretty good. Now you're going to have Fried in a game 1, Rodon in a game 2, and then it's like, okay, well, sure, we'll deal with Will Warren for 4, right? We'll give the ball to Cam Schlitter for 2. Luis Heel comes back, he can throw 3 innings. It's going to be more piecemeal than a traditional playoff approach, but I think it's a really interesting way to go about it for the Yankees.
Yeah, I think that's valid, but this has to be one of the more active deadlines that we've seen for New York. I mean, that's a lot of players to add to the major league roster. I mean, not that they, Joe Harvey aside, not that they usually do nothing, but this is really a heck of a collection of players to add on both sides of the ball that just makes their team look completely different. And that's impressive. Now, I will say I'm very, very compelled by what this Doval return is going to be, because when you saw what the Giants were able to get for Tyler Rogers, who was a rental, Doval, I believe, has multiple years of control left, if I'm not mistaken. And I have to imagine that would give him considerable trade value. I mean, I know he's been pretty volatile over the past few years at times with the strike throwing, but the upside with him is pretty tremendous. Now he's definitely capable of an outing that is going to drive Yankees fans absolutely nuts. But you know, 29 other fan bases can enjoy that when Duvall's walking the house in the postseason.
Oh yeah, dude. The return for Griffin Jax is Taj Bradley. Just Taj Bradley.
Whoa. Okay, so Taj Bradley was kind of building towards looking like one of the better young starting pitchers in the league. Had a bit of a hiccup recently where they sent him down to kind of work on some stuff, which I was kind of taken aback by because he had a couple bad outings, but it's not like his ERA was 10. I mean, this is one way to do this, right? That is a heck of a bet on one guy as they now try and essentially rebuild the rotation. If they traded Griffin Jax, and if I'm seeing this correctly, that they also traded Louis Varland to Toronto, who the heck is left in Minnesota? I mean, this is just, Joe Ryan is just hanging out there by himself. I mean, this is a one hell of a teardown. My goodness.
Very odd. Huh.
So I'm a little this Minnesota thing, I think we're really trying to wrap our head around, because this is, even though we knew they could be sellers, I think when we zoom out, this is going to be one of the more dramatic sell-offs we've had in a really, really long time for a team that we were not thinking about in those terms necessarily.
Absolutely agree. We're now at 6:11 Eastern, and we'll maybe get one or two more that trickle out, but I think we're pretty done, and I am fascinated by what has not happened today.
Yes. So I think we should take a quick break, and when we return, we are going to take a little bit of a zoom out, take stock in what didn't happen, what teams ended up doing very little, and then guess what? We're doing the good, the bad, the ugly later. If you're tuning into Baseball Barbacast and you have no idea what I'm talking about, I can't wait for you to join us for a good, the bad, the ugly. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back.
Don't go anywhere.
Very, very shortly. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on Baseball Barbacast.
And we're back here on Baseball Barbacast. Don't worry, we didn't get traded. Dude, getting traded is just such a weird thing. But that's what the day is all about. This is trade deadline day. You're watching, listening, engaging, enjoying, despising our show, Baseball Barbacast. It is 6:14 Eastern time. And I think we're about done. We will wait another couple of minutes to yell about the Dodgers doing nothing. But let's talk about two other NL contenders quickly, two NL East foes who both said, reliever, please.
Yeah. Let's go around the league. Now, Jake, a lot of these moves were yesterday. These were merely the appetizer to the AJ Preller and Houston Astros chaos of deadline day. But the Mets and Phillies kind of were going at it indirectly on the day before deadline day, as the New York Mets, if you thought the Yankees remade their bullpen, the Mets went pretty hard in the reliever market, bringing in first, they brought in Gregory Soto, which was, I guess, the first one. And it was like, okay, Gregory Soto, we get it. You know, he shouldn't be necessarily closing any games, but that he throws hard. He's been a closer before. Great, Gregory Soto. And then it's like, okay, well, where are we going from here? Then yesterday, we get Ryan Helsley and Tyler Rogers. Just a wonderful contrast of pitchers. One of the hardest throwers in the league, and the softest thrower in the league. He is our submariner in 2025. That is Tyler Rogers, the king of soft contact. He comes over from San Francisco for a very interesting 3-team package. And Ryan Helsley comes over from St. Louis. Now, Ryan Helsley is, I think, they're both very interesting for their own reasons. But I think that Helsley, someone who last year was arguably the second best closer in the sport behind Clase. He also, got some, down ballot, I think either MVP or Cy Young votes. This year was a step back. Now the stuff is still there. He's still throwing 100. The fastball has not played in the same way. The slider is still tremendous, but we knew that he was going to be on the move because his contract is expiring, because he is striking out. He's still striking out a bunch of guys, and he brings swing and miss to a bullpen that clearly could still need it, certainly beyond Edwin Diaz. So I'm not expecting him to take Edwin Diaz's job, but you move him to the 8th inning, and that's a pretty sweet setup. Whereas Tyler Rogers, you can kind of bring him in all kinds of weird situations, but for the most part, you're looking for soft contact, you're looking for ground balls, and you can most relevantly to Tyler Rogers, you can bring him in all the time. He has pitched in more games in the big leagues over the last 6 seasons than anyone by like 20. And so he is very available. That is a lovely thing to give to a manager like Carlos Mendoza, who for some of these other harder throwing guys, it's like, yeah, he's down because he throws 100 and he's kind of worn out. Like Tyler Rogers, he's ready to go basically every day.
So my pops is a Mets fan, and the other night he goes, "What do I need to know about this Tyler Rogers guy? What's anything special about him?" And I said, "Oh, yes, there is."
You said you thought I threw weird. Wait till you look at Tyler Rogers.
I said he's a submariner. My dad said, "What does it look like?" I said, "You ever throw spaghetti in the air at anything? You ever throw a piece of spaghetti?" That's what it looks like when Tyler Rogers pitches. Not the motion of throwing spaghetti, but the actual spaghetti in the air. It's a piece of spaghetti flying end over end through space.
I'm sorry. This is a good example where we're doing a live podcast. Are people throwing spaghetti? Is this something that people do? Am I missing something here?
Yeah.
Let me know in the chat. What does spaghetti look like when it's being thrown? You're like, when you throw spaghetti. So please let me know. YouTube chat, I got an eye on it. This is, of all the Jake Mintz analogies,
what did you do for your honeymoon?
I'm really struggling to grasp. So just let me know. But anyway, Tyler Rogers, he does throw very funky. He has been very available. He is one of 2 Rogers twins that have been traded at this deadline. I understand Taylor Rogers was also traded again today, but let's focus on Tyler. Let's focus on Helsley. Let's focus on Soto. We'll get to the Mets also bring in Cedric Mullins. Yeah. The Mets gave up a lot of guys for these pitchers and Cedric Mullins. I think that I'm not going to go prospect by prospect on that. I will say that their willingness to give up all those guys and where they got them from, whether it was undrafted guys, whether it was lower drafted guys, international, says a lot about how the strides they've made from a player development standpoint. They have to feel really good that they've been able to turn some high picks, some low picks, some other trades, all this stuff into now major league talent. That is not something that they've necessarily been able to do in recent years. I think that says a lot about David Stearns and kind of what they built over the last couple of seasons.
Very interesting deadline for the Mets. So David Stearns, right, takes over last year. it was really his first deadline. And at the deadline last year, it's easy to forget now in the afterglow of OMG world, but the Mets were not really in it at the deadline, and they kind of took a couple half measures. They went out and got Jesse Winker, who helped. They went out and got Ryan Stanek and Phil Maton, but it didn't feel like foot on the gas, David Stearns putting his stamp on a deadline. And this year it was like, okay, is he going to be passive? Is he going to operate the way he did in Milwaukee, where it was more half measure oriented? And I would say that I really liked their deadline for what they did and for what they didn't do, right? So there were so many different directions that the Mets could have gone, just because they have this surplus of controllable young position players at the big league level that they didn't trade away from. That's Vientos, that's Luis Angel Acuna, that's Brett Beatty, and they held on to those guys. I think that's probably the smart move. And it is, like you mentioned, a credit to this farm system that is churning out talent, that they were able to give up so many players to go and reinforce their bullpen, which was an obvious need. And when you look at the roster, you're like, what else could they have possibly gotten besides the bullpen? Well, we wake up today, do the deadline day, Cedric Mullins going to the New York Mets to fill in and probably be the everyday outfielder. Now, at first glance, a platoon would make sense. He's lefty, Tyrone Taylor is righty. However, Mullins' numbers against lefties this year are better than his numbers against righties. He's kind of a reverse splits guy this season. So I think he's just going to kind of be the everyday center fielder, at least at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's interesting. By the way, people are validating you. Everyone's throwing spaghetti, so you're actually in the clear here. So this is on me.
I know.
I guess I haven't been making spaghetti correctly, so I apologize. I'm gonna hold that L. That's totally on me. That said, as you were kind of mentioning, like the bigger picture thing about the Mets too being able to do all these deals. This is really the first time where it's felt like what Steve Cohen wants them to be, which is the Dodgers, right? When you're able to flip all these pieces that you didn't know that they even had for now major league talent, you're like, what? How did they do that? They still have all their top prospects. That is very Dodgers-y. And especially at a deadline where the Dodgers didn't end up doing very much, I think that says a lot about where the Mets are, and you have to give them a lot of credit. And as for this bullpen that they've kind of built, it's a group that at their best, I mean, that's a lot of different looks. That's a lot of interesting velocity from both sides, all building up to Edwin Diaz. And I think in the same way as the Yankees, arguably even more important, because you could say that the instability in the rotation is even greater for the Mets compared to the Yankees in some respects. I think it's going to be important for them to be able to shorten games, and I think that they were able to do that. I think that's also a good transition to the Phillies, who are kind of a different situation in the way that their pitching staff is built. But is there anything else on the Mets before we get to the Phillies?
No, let's go over to the Phillies, who make two moves at this deadline. Acquiring closer Yohan Duran from the Minnesota Twins in exchange for starting pitcher Mick Abel and catcher Eduardo Tait. Tait looks like Tate. It is Tait. He is, I believe, in high A. He's a very interesting prospect, kind of a top 50 type. Mick Abel, I'm not sure if he still has prospect eligibility or not, but he came up this year, debuted, made a handful of starts, looked really good at times, looked really shaky at times. But the Phillies trade what I would say are two of their best 5 prospects to go out and get a legitimate closer. Relievers, they're volatile. We've mentioned that. Duran is less volatile because of how overwhelming the stuff is.
Yeah, but again, we've already talked about Mason Miller on here, and if we're just going on trade value because he's cheaper and has more years, I can understand Mason Miller being more attractive. That said, like, I could not be a bigger fan of this guy. I mean, I think I mentioned Griffin Jax also traded. Like, there's some really, really good relievers that were on the move. I just think Duran is tremendous. I mean, it's not just that he throws as hard as he does. He's got this splitter at 97. He gets a truly elite rate of ground balls while also getting an elite rate of strikeouts. That is a short list of guys to have, a 64% ground ball rate, a strikeout rate north of 25%. That's just not that many guys. Normally it's one or the other. And he's also throwing a lot of strikes. He's not as necessarily going to be as vulnerable to just suddenly walking the house. So I just think this is exactly what they needed. Now, did they need more than him because where their bullpen was an even more precarious position than some of these other teams. I think that's worth debating. It's, they signed David Robertson. They're going to get him back at some point, but what is he? He's 40 years old.
So,
we really don't know what to expect there. I just think Duran's awesome. And this is clearly for the cost, which we can get to in a second, but I'm so totally impressed and agree with Dombrowski identifying him as the guy to go out and get.
So this is a great comparison to the Yankees, in my opinion. The Phillies staff leads baseball in innings pitched by a ton. Okay. 613 and 2/3 innings pitched. They're first. That is about, that is 30 more innings than Texas with one fewer game. So you go innings per start, Phillies are way above everyone. And so what that means is they just straight up need fewer relievers, elite relievers to get through the game. The Mets are averaging, they're 12th in baseball in innings, right, from their rotation. So they probably need a couple more elite relievers that they feel comfortable about in the back end of a playoff game. Now, the Phillies have been burned by this strategy in the past in the playoffs, but you can only go out and get the guy who's good right now, whether they underperform in the postseason like Carlos Estevez did last year. That's something of a roulette wheel. And I think to go out and get Duran, who has control, so that next year at the deadline, the Phillies don't have to do this again. Maybe Dave Dombrowski deserves credit for being active at this deadline and going out and getting Duran, but he also deserves a bit of criticism for getting into this position to begin with. They were not active enough over the offseason, letting Estevez go, letting Jeff Hoffman go. Now, yes, they couldn't have controlled the Jose Alvarado suspension. That is kind of the wild card here. And now that you're pointing and nodding, it's your turn to throw some spaghetti.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And I wanted to bring up Alvarado, not just because that is the one thing that, of course, the Phillies could not control for. He is one of the most interesting characters to me in the second half because he's going to come back. He is not eligible for the postseason, but they still are going to need him. And what's going to happen is they might need him to win this division. That's very possible. And then he's going to go away. And you can't trade for someone on October 1st. So, maybe they get him back and that helps. There's still going to be situations when, especially once you get to the postseason, when Jesus Luzardo doesn't have it and he only goes 4. And you have to cover 4, 5, 6, 7 before you get to Duran, right? Before you get to even if Kerkering really locks it down, right? Romano, who knows? Robertson. That is
no
what
way.
Is...
No way.
What do you say? No
Jesus Luzardo is getting a postseason start, in my opinion.
Oh, whoa! Wait, well, hold on a second. You're saying no way. You're saying no chance. That feels extreme. That feels extreme.
I'm saying I think it's very unlikely.
It's more likely. This is interesting. Do you think it's more likely he gets one or Nola?
Nola, not even close.
Okay. Because this is the other part about some of the decisions that they're going to make. Because it's also possible that Luzardo or Suarez moves into the bullpen when we get to the postseason. I don't know what to expect from Nola at this point. Dude, this is the first time he's really ever been hurt. So he's going to, it's not like he was killing it before. So, yeah.
That is a really important point about the Phillies. I talked about the amount of innings they're getting from their starters versus the Mets, but the extra pieces the Phillies have that they're going to move to the bullpen in October. Now, it's not that easy, right? Tell them, Wash. Still, with Andrew Painter waiting in AAA, they're managing his innings count so that they can get important innings out of him in the big leagues down the stretch, probably in the bullpen if I had to guess. Okay. They're going to move Walker back to the bullpen. I know he's not sexy, but he can be a guy in the bridge in the middle innings with how well he's pitched this year. And then Luzardo. And I think that that's a significant trio that they're going to get to move into the bullpen come October. All right. Enough of the Phillies and the Mets. Let's keep flying around the league. Where do you want to head to next?
I know I sound biased, but can we talk about the Seattle Mariners? Because we've been talking about Eugenio Suárez as if he is, Mike Schmidt for the last 2 weeks. And I understand that because there weren't a lot of big bats on the market and he has 36 home runs. And he's just the best. And nobody that has ever encountered Gino in any form, it comes away feeling anything other than good vibes only, of course. And following up on the acquisition with this same team, Josh Naylor, for them to go out and get Eugenio Suárez for a package of players who, again, like, aren't necessarily going to hurt as much as what we assumed the Suárez bidding was going to get to. We thought with Cubs and the Yankees, and some of those teams ended up doing stuff, right? The Yankees getting McMahon, the Reds, I guess, who were contemplating a reunion, getting Cabrian Hayes in one of the more head-scratching deals of the deadline. And then the Cubs, I guess, opting for Willie Castro, right? That was after the fact, but still, this is one of the more aggressive moves that Seattle has made. And now, for the first time in a long time, we are looking at a Mariners lineup that is just kind of indisputably good on paper in a way that it just hasn't been in a long time.
Best Mariners lineup since like 2001.
I mean, I guess you can, I possibly, certainly the best Mariners lineup I can remember watching. And, I've been watching them closely for about, 10, 12 years. It doesn't go back as far, but most of those years before that, after 2001, were pretty bad. So yeah, on paper, this is an astonishing group, right? And that's even factoring in that, JP Crawford has cooled off and Julio's not necessarily at full go, but those guys are still above average. And then you add in this historic season from Cal. Randy, an all-star, has been terrific, right? And then you add in Naylor, who's just like good. It's just like a good hitter that you have, because you're not relying on him too much. And then you add in Suárez, which, even if you factor in some amount of regression, is another, fantastic power bat. So even if he does start striking out or the batting average is down, that's just an impact guy that you can't miss to. And so this lineup is just now so much harder to pitch to. It's just going to be more exhausting for pitchers to get through this lineup. Whereas before, some of those guys at the bottom, it was just kind of automatic outs, particularly Ben Williamson. Respectfully, of course, as a rookie, they asked a lot from him. Jorge Polanco, another guy who's gone really hot and cold, but he was one of the best hitters in baseball in April and has been once again one of the best hitters in baseball in July. It's a lot of really, really, really good hitters. I think Suárez especially gives them another really important element against left-handed pitching that they didn't really have. I know his splits are pretty much even, but you got to give him credit. I mean, I'm disappointed that the Mariners did not add another reliever or two or three. I think Caleb Ferguson is solid. They needed a lefty. That part is definitely a letdown, but what they've managed to put together offensively is as good as really any of these other teams in the AL.
Getting Gino back in town is, dude, he's the best. Like, if you're building, we've talked about this a couple of times, if you're building like the Mount Rushmore of great baseball dudes currently playing, I think Gino, the three that are on there for me are Gino, Schwarber, and Matt Boyd. I would maybe throw Oswaldo Cabrera up there. You haven't spent as much time on him.
He's more that energy. Yeah, Oswaldo is tremendous.
Like,
and by the quartet, way, like, I'm also just so happy for Gino, because clearly, like, he was very open about it. Like, he loved his time in Arizona, and I'm sure because he is this overwhelming positive presence, if he was traded to the Yankees or the Cubs, a place that was not familiar, I'm sure he would have, after some adjustment, been as beloved as he would be anywhere else. But clearly this was something that he was ecstatic about also. And I think that has to, because remember, he was there last time they were in the postseason. And so he knows what it kind of takes to get back there. And so I think he's going to be excited to be back in the mix.
Okay. Let's do this. I want to talk about starting pitching, because this deadline was, I would say, notorious, like notably light on starting pitching in a very, very interesting way. I went back and looked over the last couple of years how many pitchers get moved at the deadline that end up starting a playoff game. Because personally, when I think about the deadline and what teams need to do to add, are you adding a pitcher that you can give the ball to in a playoff game and feel good about it? That's here. Then you have like every 5 years where like an ace, a real ace, gets moved. I'm talking Randy Johnson, 1999 to the Astros, throwing like a 1-8. I'm talking Sabathia. Like, that does not happen a whole lot. Then you have the depth dudes where it's like, we need someone to just chew up innings, right? What is that threshold? And last year there were only 4: Jack Flaherty, Alex Cobb, Frankie Montas, Zach Eflin. Now, you say Kikuchi should be on this list. Okay. He was traded to the Astros to start a playoff game and would have started game 3 if they hadn't gotten embarrassed at home by the Tigers. So that is in my mind like 0.2. It's like 4.2. 2023, Verlander, Jordan Montgomery, who just got traded to the Brewers, apparently, which is super weird.
Didn't he get TJ? What isn't he an expire? Like, what even is that? That's bizarre.
I don't know. We get back to that.
Okay,
Scherzer and Lance Lynn. How many players got moved at the deadline this year that are going to start a playoff game? Over under 0.5.
I mean, the only one that is like feels like it is actually plan A is Shane Bieber. And that, for a lot of reasons, is not a guarantee. I think Toronto going out and getting Shane Bieber, who has still yet to return to the major leagues, but looked good in the Double-A rehab outing earlier this week. We knew Cleveland was going to flip him, even if they weren't going to trade Kwan. That's the idea. I think Toronto was trying to raise their ceiling more than raising their floor, and I think Bieber qualifies as that. But the Blue Jays quietly have 5 competent starters right now. And so how they work Bieber into this rotation down the stretch, let alone in the postseason, is very interesting. But too many good pitchers is a good problem to have. Are you going to be the one to tell Max Scherzer he's going to the bullpen in the postseason? I don't envy that. If John Schneider has to do that, It's more likely to be Eric Lauer. What would it mean for a Bassett, a Gausman, a Barrios, who are, of course, older veteran guys? But Bieber, and maybe Bieber just isn't, maybe he just isn't awesome, because we just don't know. What exactly he's going to look like. So it's clearly a gamble, but that's the only one that looks like anything resembling.
So there are 3 others.
Right? I guess some of the other ones we got late were who?
So the 3 others I can squint and see is Chris Paddock for the Tigers.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
I think that is possible. I think Merrill Kelly to the Rangers, if they make the playoffs, is possible. Although the Rangers, would they want him to start behind DeGrom, Eovaldi, Tyler Mahle if he comes back healthy? Maybe. And then Mike Soroka going to the Cubs could be an, oh no, he has to start a playoff game.
Well, Dustin May probably also qualifies as that. Zach Littell probably also qualifies as that.
This is what I'm trying to convey, is that the way that teams are going about acquiring players who get outs is different now. It's not just give me your starter and let's roll. It's I'm going to get 3 relievers who I like, and I'm going to have one throw 4 outs and one throw 3 and one throw 5, and they'll go through the order one time. It's just a different dynamic now, which I find to be very interesting.
Well, and we can't, I guess Charlie Morton is another starter that got moved. JP Sears is a starter that got moved. But there's a lot of starters that we were ready to get moved that didn't, right? That's Edward Cabrera. That's Sandy Alcantara. That's Joe Ryan. That's Mitch Keller, who we were, that felt like the Pirate that they were really ready to get rid of. Even Mackenzie Gore, a lot of rumors around him. He would certainly qualify. Dylan Cease, kind of down to the last minute. Seth Lugo, who signed an extension instead of being traded. So there was a lot of guys who would have fit that criteria that just for one reason or another did not end up getting traded. And so instead we saw a boatload of relievers who will also impact the game in the postseason, right? I mean, they're in different innings, but they're going to feel every bit as high leverage. It's just a kind of a different form of that.
All right, let's do nuclear overreaction. Some teams had good deadlines. Some teams had bad deadlines. Let's pull our hair out and yell about it. Without doing winners and losers, we're going to get angrier than that and more celebratory. Who had a good deadline, Jordan? When I ask that very simple, vague, unhelpful question, what comes to mind?
New York. They got rid of Jake Mintz, and they got a whole bunch of good players. That's the Mets and the Yankees. What a tremendous sequence of events for New York City. I just think to see both of these teams really push in a real way, in creative ways, in ways that leveraged the depth that they had amassed in the minors. in ways that in some cases you could say they gave up a lot, some cases you gave up a little. They identified that this is not a time to just hang out. This is a time to try and be one of the best teams in baseball, which both teams in New York should be trying to be at all times. And for different reasons, I give both of those teams credit as clear winners.
I want to call Houston a winner because they made me feel like a winner today. You know, like I'm investing time and energy and effort into covering the deadline and following it for the hope that maybe something comes flying out of left field, or in this case, shortstop or third base. Carlos Correa sleeping in Houston, Texas tonight was just not something that any of us were thinking about when we woke up this morning. And does it make the Astros better? I think so. Is it kind of fan service in a little way? Like the Astros fans tonight, when they go to sleep and their heads are hitting, they're like, hell yeah, dude. Correa is back. And just that energy of Correa is back. Astros, big thumbs up. Also adding Ramon Arias, who's kind of a versatile infield type from the Astros. Jesus Sanchez, who's going to get a bunch of at-bats in an outfield corner. He has some control left. That's not nothing. I really like what Houston did at the deadline. One last thing about winners before we move to losers. So we are culpable in this, but when we call teams winners, it is usually because they did things. They were active. And as I just mentioned in celebrating the Astros, we are biased in that manner. We're fans. This is entertainment. We want stuff to happen. I do think there are probably teams that didn't do things today that might end up deserving credit for that. Teams that held cards, that stuck to their guns, that didn't move players at prices they didn't think were worth that. For that reason, I'm going to give Miami a winner. Not trading Edward Cabrera or Sandy Alcantara, because the deal didn't actualize. Now, I don't know what deals were on Peter Bendix, the Pobo's table, but I just want to show a little bit of love to restraint, which is a classic Jake Mintz thing to do.
Yeah, I was going to say that's it's kind of out of character. It is interesting because it's hard to evaluate what that means, to be like, whoa, well, what did they turn down? We don't know what packages there are, but I understand the sentiment that you're getting at, and I do not totally disagree. But are there teams that either did a lot or did very little that disappointed you?
Well, I want to give a half credit here to the Cleveland Guardians, for not trading Steven Kwan. Okay. Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz hitting the parlay button, understandably threw the Gardos season into turmoil this week over the last month. It changes the calculus for this season, not having Clase, one of the best relievers in baseball. I understand that. And for an organization with a smaller budget, smaller market that is constantly having to think about the future, about sustainability, about value, about all these things, you could have understood a path for them trading Steven Kwan for the future. And I'm so glad they didn't. And I'm glad they didn't because every minute, every second on earth that Jose frickin' Ramirez plays for your baseball team, you owe it to yourself, to him, to the fan base to contend in that window, right? Now, there are other criticisms that could and should certainly be lobbed at Cleveland's front office for things that they have done or have not done, the trades that they have nailed or they have failed. But in this moment, not mortgaging the future, not parting with Kwan and keeping him around to the point that now next spring training, Cleveland fans can envision a trip to the playoffs. I don't think that happens if you trade Kwan today. And so kudos to the Guardians for what they did not do.
I agree. And as we flip it to losers, even though they, got some interesting young talent, just the fact that now the Twins are just plummeting back into a level of irrelevance that is troubling. I think it's kind of that simple. I think the Pirates also, when you see what they did or didn't get back, is also an easy one. But Minnesota, for just how different now, we're just in as I mentioned, like that level of relevance, and people, there are some people that love Eduardo Taiit and think that Mick Abel is going to be, a 2 or 3 starter, and I like Taj Bradley a lot, right? But man, I'm just looking at the remnants of this roster, and I don't know what I'm supposed to believe about. And clearly, it's a macro thing about this is just a time of transition. But this was a franchise that it felt like had started to establish themselves as something that we could kind of trust as competing. And now we're looking at kind of a desolate landscape around Joe Ryan and I guess whatever Royce Lewis is, which we still don't even really know. So that just it's a bummer.
We entered this year as they had these 3 injury-prone superstars with Buxton,
Buxton too.
Correa.
Oh God,
Buxton,
man,
Correa, and Royce Lewis. And Royce Lewis hurting bad. Correa just bad. Now on the Astros. Buxton, the best Buxton season you could ever dream of, and it doesn't matter. I got a text from a buddy, a real cake eater type from Minnesota. And he said, how am I supposed to feel about today as a Twins fan? And I said, incredibly, phenomenally, inconsolably sad. Because that's what this day represents for the Twins and the fans, is a slide into irrelevance, right? Having Carlos Correa on the Twins, even if you're not thinking about them all the time, makes them more relevant than they were for a long time. I guess like when they were bad, yes, but he was the most recognizable Twin since before since Mauer. And I think not having him around anymore makes the Twins less relevant. Other loser for me, I think it's the Red Sox.
Yeah.
I think the Red Sox are a loser for me. Not because of the moves itself, but because of what they keep promising us that they're going to do. Now, Jordan, this is a character flaw that I have, and I'll fully admit that. You know that. I'm an overpromiser. Okay? I do that. You tell me, don't say that. You're not going to do that. It's a flaw. Okay? Craig Breslow, chief baseball officer of the Red Sox, might have a similar flaw. Because when they traded Devers like a month and a half ago, the reporting and the attitude around that move was like, oh, don't worry, the deadline's coming. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to go out and have the room to add salary. Where it at, though?
Well, and that's the thing. And yes, they've certainly played better than the team that got Rafael Devers. We'll get to them later. But again, when you're in this playoff race where the 2 teams sandwiching you in the standings did a lot, Seattle and New York, maybe you're just banking on, Texas, we're not scared of you. Cleveland, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, we're not scared of you. There's some validity to that. But still, you're the Red Sox. Like, come on, find a way to do something a little bit more aggressive than Steven Matz and Dustin May.
That's 7 letters. They acquired 7 letters of last name.
Think about how many letters AJ Preller dealt for. And Craig Breslow, who went to Yale, who knows more words and letters than anybody. He couldn't come up with more than 7. I think that is also a good loser. All right, Jake. Before we take one more break and do good, bad, the ugly, we're going to go really fast. Now, we're not going to go every team. Maybe we will.
Well,
let's just.
I think we switch off divisions. Let's switch off divisions. Okay.
So
3,
what we're going to do.
2.
What we're going to do.
1. Turbo mode.
Faster than fast, quicker than quick. I am lightning.
I feel the need for speed.
It's turbo time.
All right, the Toronto Blue Jays, as we mentioned, acquired Shane Bieber, Sir Anthony Dominguez, and traded away Will Wagner, the son of Billy Wagner. Maybe they were mad at him for not being around, because he went to the Hall of Fame induction. Is this punishment? I'm only kidding. Blue Jays fans are probably a little frustrated that they didn't go out and get more. I sneaky like the Bieber deal. I think it's a good buy low. Should they have maybe got something a little bit more reliable and dependable for a team that's having such an electric season. Yes, this deadline does not up the momentum, if that makes sense, for the Toronto Blue Jays in a way that it might have. The New York Yankees, we discussed this already, just bolster what was already a good bullpen. And I kind of like the Ahmed Rosario and the Jose Caballero ads to give them some bench versatility and some athleticism with Caballero, who's one of the better base stealers and fastest players of baseball. We just talked about Boston. Tampa Bay, we really don't know what you're up to. We're confused. We know a lot of people who work for the team. If you're listening and you could just off the record call and explain me, because you smarter than me not smart. And then, of course, the Baltimore Orioles, who went full sell at this deadline, trading away Ramon Arias, Andrew Kittredge, Gregory Soto, Cedric Mullins, Ryan O'Hearn, Ramon Laureano, and Sir Anthony Dominguez. Exhale. Sure, the problem is that you were bad enough to have to do this. The end of the Cedric Mullins era was equally fulfilling and disappointing that they did not have postseason success with this player who endured through the rebuild, who is the link between the Adam Jones teams for 2 months and the current Orioles. However, his last game, robbing a homer at Camden Yards to say thank you for the memories, that was pretty sweet.
Let's bring it to the Midwest. The Detroit Tigers just kind of added a bunch of pitchers. They add Charlie Morton. They add Paul Sewald. Kyle Finnegan is another back-end guy they get from the Nats. Rafael Montero has been terrible recently. They will try to fix him. Cody Hoyer has barely pitched in the last few years. He is on the team as well. So a lot of half measures, but they will help. Cleveland, all they did was trade Sewald and Shane Bieber. Cal Steven is a very, very good pitching prospect. That was a 1-for-1. I know he's a little bit injured right now, but that is someone that could be in the big leagues at the end of next year. The White Sox did not really sell too much. They did not trade Luis Robert Jr. We haven't even mentioned his name yet. They do trade Austin Slater to the Yankees and Adrian Hauser to the Rays. Again, Rays, what are you doing? Oh, they got Curtis Mead. All right, we got some fans down under now for the Chicago White Sox. Maybe the Pope can make a visit. Kansas City, Bailey Falter, as you mentioned. Mike Yastrzemski, I'm seeing this now. That's an interesting one. You get a couple young pitchers for Freddie Fermin and Stephen Kolek and Ryan Bergert, which is very solid. Also added Randall Grichuk. Again, that's another one where this is probably not the Royals' year, but I'm glad that they are still we believe in this team and we'll try again next year.
I love Freddie Freeman because if you put a bunch of marshmallows in your mouth and you say his name, it sounds like Freddie Freeman. The American League West. Houston Astros.
Whoa. God. Minnesota Twins traded everybody, and now they are going to be sad for a long time. Okay, continue.
Thank you so much. They traded Carlos Correa to the Astros. I like what they did. Made him a winner. I think I would have liked one more arm just to have an arm for Houston, but maybe that's a little bit nitpicky. Mariners discussed their deadline at length, like how aggressive they were. Another arm wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. The Rangers, kind of an odd one. They're on the periphery of the AL playoff picture. We talked about them a lot on our last podcast. When you have a team that is kind of overperforming on the mound with relievers you don't know a lot about and disappointing at the plate with famous hitters who have been good for a long time, it makes it difficult to try and upgrade a roster. And that's how this went with Merrill Kelly and Danny Colomé. That was it.
Phil Maton. Maton.
Huh?
Also.
And Phil Maton.
Phil Maton. Yeah. Who's good?
He's good. Does it make the Rangers a no doubt playoff team? Not really. The Angels, you guys are so funny, dude. The Angels are so funny. They're 4 games out. They're trying to bolster enthusiasm and foster vibes. And then they go on and get 2 middle relievers, Andrew Chafin and Luis Garcia coming into town. That'll save the day. That'll do it. I love that the Angels think that, do they not realize that everyone else is operating in a different fashion to them? Do they expect this is going to change for them at some point? Maybe, maybe not. I believe they also acquired Oswald Peraza from the Yankees.
Buy at the lowest, baby. Can't buy any lower.
If they give him a hug, give him a hug. Give him a hug. He could use one. He could use a hug. The Yankees, meanwhile, selling the dip. The Yolo County Athletics acquiring Leo DeVries. We talked about that at length. No other moves, I think, for them.
And Duhar.
Right?
and Duhart to Cincinnati for a pitching prospect. But yeah, I mean, DeVries is now going to be just he was already a very famous prospect, and now I know he's on the A's, so maybe it's not as many, but that his career is going to be a fascinating one to monitor.
Quick aside, we have talked a lot about how much it sucks for the city of Oakland, and I'm not trying to downplay that here, but we have also talked about how there are real baseball fans in the city of Las Vegas looking forward to watching this team arrive, and we shouldn't downplay that there are people who are going to live there, who do live there and will care about this team. This is a guy worth caring about. Watch Leo DeVries minor league highlights. Go see him in Midland if you're that down bad. Invest in this guy from an emotional standpoint.
Yeah. That is the AL West. Let's go to the NL East. We already talked about the Mets and the Phillies. I think we mentioned all those Mets moves: Helsley, Rogers, Soto, Mullins, Phillies, Duran. Harrison Bader is a Phillies move we did not mention. It seems like they were in the market for an outfielder. Harrison Bader, obviously bringing more defense than offense, but it's something. He's having a decent year offensively. The underlying stuff certainly is not very compelling. If he can have an awesome week in October like he did in 2022, they would love that. But obviously you're getting him for the glove.
And the Phillies need a little outfield defense because they are one of the worst defensive outfields in baseball.
Indeed. The Marlins, as we mentioned, really didn't do a whole lot, only trading Jesus Sanchez, the outfielder, and their catcher, Nick Fortes. What does that mean? They're not going to trade anyone this offseason? Probably not. But this is a really, really fun team to watch. And though I do not expect them to make the postseason, I'm looking forward to seeing those young players try to make the postseason, because that is that's cool. I'm glad that enough of their competent players are going to be around to maybe go for this miracle push. And come on, Marlins, make us proud. The Washington Nationals are a baseball team that actually were pretty active. They ended up selling off a good number of guys: Alex Call, Kyle Finnegan, Michael Soroka, bringing in a good number of young pitching prospects, and as well as a really interesting young pitcher or young shortstop in Ronnie Cruz from the Cubs. And then there's one more team in this division that
we don't. Dude, they didn't trade Raisel Iglesias or Marcelo Ozuna or Pierce Johnson, all three of whom are on expiring contracts, none of whom will get a qualifying offer. The Atlanta Braves are 14 games back of the wild card. This is the worst deadline, actually. Can't believe I didn't call them a loser before. This is the worst deadline.
Well, they certainly are losers. They've been losing a lot all season, and now they get to keep losing in the context of the trade deadline. They brought in some guys like Fetty and Carrasco and Dane Dunning to cover innings. This is bleak, folks. This is a dark time.
Brother. They got a worse record than the Pirates, and they're standing pat. Excuse me.
I assume
it's not like Alex
tomorrow. It's not like Alex Anthopoulos doesn't make trades. I'm sure he was trying to trade those guys, and it wouldn't surprise me if the whole league was just laughing at them. Yeah, no, we're not taking your crappy rentals. You gotta sit in this. You gotta just really live in this disaster of a season.
Rolling Marcelo Ozuna out there to take at bats away from your young catching tandem.
Terrible. Awful. Okay, awful. Go to NL Central.
Chicago Cubs. I want to hate on the Cubs because they weren't as active as I hoped they'd be. And it is, the timing here is fascinating with Jed Hoyer getting an extension 2 days ago, their president of baseball operations. I want to hate on him a little bit. I like Kittredge. I think that's a good add to the bullpen. And I love Willie Castro so much. He's my personal cheeseball of the deadline. And so I can't really hate on the Cubs too much. Brewers, I will hate on you, and I will hate on you so freaking hard. Big loser of the deadline. I said this on last episode. 2021, they had 98% playoff odds, and all they acquired was Daniel Norris and another guy. I can't remember. John Curtis is who it was. And I predicted that they were going to hold their cards and not do anything at this deadline and be passive. And boy, that's what they did. They go out and they acquired Danny Jansen as their backup catcher. They get Shelby Miller to help with the bullpen, and they get Jordan Montgomery to to do what?
No
He got
I have
TJ in
no,
April.
not even an ounce of a clue. If you can let us know in the chat, because we're going to get to your questions and comments here soon. Just because I am a fact checker at heart, and someone did correct us, they did trade for Eduardo Escobar, who was an All-Star in 2021, but they didn't trade for any All-Stars this time. And now, even though I
Bad
guess
Jake.
this is an interesting one where the Cubs are like, why would we trade all of our good prospects? It's not like the Brewers are doing anything. But
Like if
guess
I need
what?
to beat Jordan in a
division
race, if I need to beat Jordan in a race and he's jogging, like I'm not going to sprint, you know? The Reds, they're picking up the pace, acquiring Brian Hayes in a trade that a lot of people hated on, and I kind of like it, and I'll tell you why. He's getting paid $7 million for the next couple of years. He's going to put up a win and a half worth of defense, incredible defender at the hot corner. Not being in Pittsburgh would make anybody feel better, not the city, the team, underrated town. And if the bat takes any kind of step forward, he's a fine player. And if he hits 8th or 9th and plays great defense in 3rd, like, sure, they didn't give that much to get him. I have no problem with this deal. And then the St. Louis Cardinals, they sold, trading Helsley, Matz, getting rid of Eric Fetty. Not maybe as full of a sell as some people expected. Arenado, Brendan Donovan's name was whispered. They didn't do any of those things. Kind of played it relatively safe here, only doing the obvious ones. And then the Pirates, we talked about getting rid of Bednar and Hayes. Weird deadline for them with their president of baseball operations, Ben Cherington. Maybe he's the GM. I don't even remember. Frankly, I don't particularly care because he doesn't seem like he's going to be there for a whole lot longer. Sad times in Pittsburgh.
NL West. Let's start with those Dodgers. The defending champs got a lot for Hunter Fiducia, but not necessarily players that are going to help immediately, although maybe Paul Gervais is in this bullpen somehow if there are a few injuries away. They apparently got James Tibbs, who was just traded to the Red Sox from the Giants, first-round pick last year, for Dustin May, which is fascinating. They get Alex Call from the Nationals. Alex Call's a nice player. Brock Stewart will help the bullpen from Minnesota. But this, I mean, it is funny, right? Because Freeman was like, well, I don't want to buy at the deadline. That's why I'm spending all this money. And I guess he kind of acted on that. He's like, well, I'm not going to trade away my prospects at the deadline. He doesn't want to do it. Of course, the question is, should he have? What does that look like? Should it have been Quan? Should he have gone after Sandy Alcantara? Should he have gone, like, who knows? But at the end of the day, they really did not add a whole lot. We, of course, already talked about the Padres, who added a whole bunch of famous major leaguers. And then Nestor Cortez is the one I'm really kind of processing here now, but Mason Miller and JP Sears and Ramon Laureano and Ryan O'Hearn and Freddie Fermin. So very new look roster there. Very impressive there. If you're a prospect hugger and a Padres fan, I do not understand you whatsoever. The Giants, I'm going to talk about you in my bad coming up in a little bit, but you did get a good number of interesting prospects. So credit to you for that. And hey, the Colorado Rockies. Oh, quickly, I'll just do the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks trade Miller Kelly away. They don't trade Zach Gallen. They do trade Suarez and Naylor and Shelby Miller to the Brewers. So they did get a good number of interesting young, mostly pitchers back. And Tyler Locklear, he'll get immediate playing time. So that'll be interesting to see what he can do with regular big league reps. And then the Colorado Rockies, who are, of course, on pace for no longer definitely the worst season in baseball history, but at least one of. They traded Jake Bird and they traded Tyler Kinley. They traded Ryan McMahon, which for the Rockies is a lot of wheeling and dealing. So credit to them. They got some in. Rock Riggio is a delight. He's a fun player to watch.
Rock
Riggio.
Yeah,
There you go. Rock. That's right there. I don't think that's why they traded for him, but I wouldn't put it past them. So good for them for participating in the trade market. We are going to take a break. If you want to hear, again, you're getting all kinds of fantastic chats. Leave your comments, questions. We're going to get to them right when we get back before we do the good, the bad, the Uggla on this massive marathon edition of Baseball Barbacast. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Baseball Barbacast, our third and final chunk of this epic edition of our terrific podcast, if I do say so myself. Sorry, that wasn't very humble of me. All right, it's time to get to your wonderful questions and comments. Normally, this is a segment where we laugh at Twitter mentions for baseball teams who lost in embarrassing fashion. But in this case, it is our own mentions. It is time for Sorry for Your Mentions. I'm excited about this. Thank you all for participating in our first ever live edition of Baseball Barbacast. And let's get to those comments. We begin with one from John who says, need the Pope to announce a trade to cap this off. Yes. How does Pope Leo feel about the Adrian Hauser deal for Curtis Mead?
Screen fades from black. Bird's eye view. Drone shot. We're at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Cheering, adoring crowds. Out onto the Pope balcony walks the Pope. People roar. They hoot, they holler. Oh, Pope. Dear Pope, my Pope. Big Pope. And he says, silence, my young ones. The Chicago White Sox have acquired Gage Zeal in exchange for Austin Slater. And the crowd goes wild.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. Everyone coming from around the world remembers how nasty Gage Zeal was at the University of Miami. That is a great one, John. I mean, obviously, we'll keep the Pope jokes coming. This one comes from Joe. Joe says, after they do the good, the bad, the ugly, they should really treat this to a shoots and ladders stream. Can't stop looking at games behind Jake. Yeah, to me, I've been thinking about Guess Who and Stratego much more than Shoots and Ladders, but a lot of great options. This is Jake's parents' basement where we've got all kinds of great board games. Do you have any personal favorites of the games behind you?
Yeah, my personal favorite is right here. This is a Spanish version of Trouble. Trouble, but it is Obstáculos.
Okay. You got to frame it up more. You got to get it more centered for us to see. There we go.
Obstáculos.
That's terrific. All right, we'll have to make that happen. Now that we have more time, we're not writing about trades. Jake, where's your honey bucket hat? Yeah, what happened to it? That was very well received on the podcast
upstairs
yesterday. It is still. Don't make sure you don't lose that. But that is a good question. I'm glad Honey Bucket's getting that free ad that they didn't ask for.
You think there are any guys traded today who are in this? The baseball's 100 greatest players?
I think so. Someone was scared about where we went earlier. It was just don't worry. Baseball juice. What does baseball juice taste like? I don't know. I am a big juice guy. I feel like I'm more of a juice guy than you are. But don't worry, we made it back. This from Josh. Padres currently accepting applications for anyone who wants to play an A-ball tonight. Yes. I mean, come on. Let's get Jake some innings. Let's try out. If you live near any of those affiliates, I would at least show up and just be ready. Like at least stretch on your way to the ballpark. There you go. We got a lot of people confirming indeed that spaghetti is something that you throw. So I apologize. I guess I'll have to give that a shot. That's on me. I didn't know there was. Can't you just taste it? Isn't that a way you can find out if spaghetti's done? Freddie. Oh boy. Sometimes you have to rebuild the rebuild. Ask the Giants. Oof. More on that in a second. Coming up again in the bad portion of the good, the bad, the Uggla. Again, all these wonderful questions coming on YouTube. We really appreciate all of you tuning in for this. Do we have any more before we wrap it up here with the good, the bad, the Uggla? No. All right. Let's get to our own segment. Thank you all for participating, though. We really appreciate it. Now it is time for our favorite part of the week: the good, the bad, the Uggla.
One thing good, one thing bad, one thing Uggla. What do you pick? Jordan Shusterman, please begin. One thing that was good from the week in baseball.
I do not know what inspired this. However, a large section of fans at Angels Stadium dressed up as Angels, and we had Angels in the outfield. Jake, we don't like that many baseball movies, but Angels in the Outfield is one that we truly adore. And this, I mean, I guess this isn't necessarily an overt movie reference, but the point is this is just tremendous stuff. The amount of coordination. Now, I will say it's a little depressing to see how empty it is beyond this section. That said, surely after these big deals for Luis Garcia and Oswald Peraza and Andrew Chafin, they'll be filling those seats in Anaheim, getting ready for this playoff push. I know they lost this game, which is, fitting, but it sounds like these people were having a great time, and I had a good time watching the videos of them.
Good for me this week was an Instagram comment by a soccer player, as I'm sure you all expected. Antoine Griezmann, who is a striker for Atletico Madrid. Really one of the, I would say, does soccer have a Hall of Fame? I don't know. He would be like a borderline Hall of Famer, French international. He's 34 years old, and apparently he's watching the Mariners, because when Seattle went out and acquired Eugenio Suárez, he went on the Instagram post and commented, and he said, he's back. Very random, very good. I think this is because he is friends with Julio Rodriguez, because they're both sponsored by Adidas. But the idea that Antoine Griezmann knows enough about the Mariners to know that, like, Gino Suarez is coming back, right? Like, did he have Tyler Locklear takes? Was he amped about Naylor?
And he's like, no, man, like, Cranton is going to be a closer. Like, he is, but he would say it in French, presumably. Yeah, I don't know.
He's watching
there's
MLB
a whole
TV.
Tim Booth of the Seattle Times wrote about Julio and Griezmann's friendship, and it just sounds like Griezmann's kind of locked in on American sports and somehow ended up connected to Julio through social media, and now he's a Mariners fan, which is just terrific. I love that for Griezmann. I don't know what team he is still on. Wasn't he on PSG, Barcelona? Atletico Madrid. Love that for the Mariners. Let's go to bad. My bad this week is the Giants. Now, did they get some good young players for the relievers that they traded away? Yeah, I think they did. That's good. This wasn't the plan. Going 2-12 leading up to the deadline, including getting swept in a 6-game homestand for the first time since 1896 in your franchise's history, is really bad and really embarrassing. And I am almost surprised that Buster Posey was willing to just take the very measured, what do the playoff odds say, and let's just get prospects kind of approach here. He is clearly has already adjusted to GM brain, which is both admirable and disappointing. But this, I can't believe that I both totally can believe and can't believe that we are heading towards another 500 season for this franchise in this year where Buster Posey was like, time to make some memories. It's like, yeah, okay. So
they changed everything,
really,
and also nothing at all. My bad is a tweet from Bob Nightingale, baseball reporter. Bob tweeted, the Philadelphia Phillies get the outfielder they need. Harrison Bader, the Minnesota Twins, who provides fabulous defense to Jeff Passan on it. He then quote tweeted this tweet and said, the Twins will receive 2 lightly regarded prospects. Now, when we talk about prospects, who, let's be real, most of the people breaking news have never watched these players. They have probably never heard of these players. And this is not to crap on Bob Nightingale or anybody breaking news. There is only so much time in the day and space in the brain to have a take on former Phillies prospects, Hendry Mendez and Jeremy with a G Valoria, heading to the Twins in exchange for Harrison Bader. Only Jordan Shusterman can hold all of this stuff in his brain. But to describe these 2 players as lightly regarded feels mean and bizarrely worded for someone who is made to word things right. I guess maybe not in Bob's case all the time. How would you, Jordan, if you were to edit this, do so in a way that was kinder to this prospect tandem?
Well, normally, if you want to be like, don't worry, they didn't give up any top prospects, you would say like none from their top 30, right? But that's not even true because Hendry Mendez is was in the Phillies top 30 in a few of these cases. So
Yeah.
that's the part that like I don't know what. I guess the question is like Bob's reporting this. He got some amount of information and something that someone else told him motivated him to say lightly regarded. So I don't know if someone else was like, these are guys we don't care about, or like how that went, but that is why it's a kind of an interesting sequence.
I would say the Twins will receive 2 prospects who are not ranked highly, 2 prospects outside the upper crust, but just
lightly regarded. Lightly
guys,
regarded is like, we don't care about their well-being.
Yeah, like these guys have parents, like I would say, what was his name? Sorry, I'm exposing him. Hendry Mendez.
Yeah.
Hendry Mendez, man, like his parent, they're people that love him. All right, I bet he's a well-regarded young man.
Yes. So lightly regarded feels. I agree that is a disappointing phrasing from Bob. Our Uggla, there are a lot of interesting prospect stories, backgrounds to choose from to highlight. Some weird triple slash lines. If you go look at Edgelin Perez, very weird. I know you're going to pick a player that was traded as well. But I want to talk about Anthony Nunez, who is one of the newest Orioles prospects, a pitching prospect who is now with the Orioles, who went from the Mets to the Orioles in the Cedric Mullins trade. Anthony Nunez has one of the more ridiculous baseball reference pages that I've ever seen. And that is because he is one of the super duper rare, total loophole, bizarre exception to the rule players who was drafted out of high school by the San Diego Padres, signed, started his career as an infielder, played a couple seasons, was released, and was like, ooh, I'm still pretty young. Could I go play college baseball? And at the Division II level, you can do that. So Anthony Nunez goes to the University of Tampa, Division II powerhouse, wins a national championship in 2024 as mostly the starting third baseman, also threw a little bit in relief. Signs with the Mets as an undrafted free agent after having a pro career before college, and is now like has this awesome slider and is dominating in the minors as a pitcher. Uggla. That is so weird. I've never seen this before. To see someone go from low A to NCAA to low A is amazing.
Can you imagine him rolling up to day one of practice at the University of Tampa with like his Padres bag? And it's like, where'd we get this guy from? Freshman? I think we got him from the Padres.
We got him from Lake Elsinore. Like, what? It's so funny. Anyway, Uggla.
My Uggla.
What's your Uggla? Yeah.
It's hot outside, Jordan. You know that? It's hot outside.
Mm-hmm.
But Shauna Palisade, there was a prospect today traded by the Los Angeles Dodgers named Sean Paul Lignan. Sean Paul. There's a player named Sean Paul. And I feel bad that I didn't know this before. I don't even remember what trade he was in, to be honest with you, because I'm tired and there's been a lot of trades.
I believe it was Alex Call. I believe he's a Washington National. You could be there for his debut, dude. You could be there for Sean Paul's debut. You think
does Sean Paul Lignan, does he walk up to Sean Paul?
He's a pitcher. Does he warm up to it? Got the right temperature? I don't know. Also, like born basically like at peak Sean Paul. He's born in like 2003, so I guess like a little bit before. It's like 2 years before temperature.
Wait.
But yeah. Oh, what? You got one more Sean Paul joke?
I'm getting news. Wait, I believe the Dodgers have also traded away low A first baseman Sean Kingston.
Oh no! How could they?
Yeah.
How could they?
I know.
They're just giving it. You know what? Dodgers deadline loser. Not even a question. That's it. I think we're done podcasting. We have a lot of writing to do. Thank you all for
Bye.
listening. Thank you to everyone behind the scenes for making this possible. Too many people to name, but we will shout out Andrew Hartz and TJ Brassel as always. So thank you to Yahoo Sports for making this possible, because this is something we've been working towards for a while, to do a live show like this. I know we went super long, and if you're listening to this on over the weekend, this is a long pod. But we had fun. We hope you had fun. So thank you all for tuning in. We really, really, really appreciate. And you can email us at baseballbarbacast@gmail.com. Jake Mintz, final thoughts from your board games.
I'm going to go play Obstaculos.
Okay. Talk to you all next week. Have a good weekend.